Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that sounds almost romantic in the old Western movies. Living as an outlaw with a price on your head. The lone gunslinger, riding into the sunset, always one step ahead of the law, free as the wind and twice as dangerous. Sounds thrilling, right? Wrong. The reality of having a bounty on your head in the Wild West was paranoia, poverty, and the constant knowledge that anyone you met might be calculating whether your friendship was worth less than the reward for your corpse. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if the content genuinely resonates with you. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Congratulations, you've done something stupid. Maybe you shot a man in a saloon fight that got out of hand, robbed a stagecoach because you were desperate and drunk, rustled some cattle thinking no one would notice, or just happened to be in the wrong place when a bank got robbed and your name got mentioned by someone trying to save their own skin. Doesn't really matter how it happened or whether you actually did it. What matters is that somewhere in a sheriff's office, a marshal's desk, or a Pinkerton agent's file, there's a piece of paper with your face on it. Crude drawing that barely resembles you, misspelled name, and underneath it, the magic words, reward, $500, dead or alive. Your life just became a gambling game where everyone else holds the cards, and you're the stakes. The first thing you notice is the silence, not peaceful silence, the kind where conversations stop when you walk into a room. The kind where the bartender's smile doesn't quite reach his eyes anymore. Where the shopkeeper, who used to joke with you now, watches your hands a little too carefully. You're not paranoid, you're awake, because the second that poster goes up, you stop being a person and start being a commodity. You're walking money. And in the Wild West, where a cowboy earns $30 a month, and most folks are one bad season away from starvation, $500 might as well be a mountain of gold. You can't trust anyone. Not the stranger offering to buy you a drink. Not the woman who smiles at you across the dance hall. Not even the kid who offers to tend your horse for a nickel. Any one of them could be memorizing your face, noting the scar on your jaw, counting the days until they can ride to the nearest marshal's office and collect. And the worst part, you wouldn't even blame them. Because if you were in their boots, broke and desperate with a family to feed, you might do the same damn thing. So you run. Because staying means dying, and dying means someone else gets paid. Let's talk about how you even end up with a bounty on your head, because it's not always as dramatic as you'd think. Sure, some men earned their wanted posters through spectacular crimes, train robberies, bank heists, shooting a deputy in broad daylight. But plenty of others stumbled into outlaw status almost by accident. And once that paper went up, there was no appealing the decision, no explaining your side, no second chances. Maybe it started with a fight. Some drunk insulted your mother or cheated at cards, and you threw a punch. He fell wrong, hit his head on the corner of a table, and didn't get back up. Suddenly you're wanted for murder even though you never meant to kill anyone. Or maybe you were working a cattle drive, and your boss shorted your pay for the third month running. So you took a few head of cattle you figured you'd earned. That's rustling. That's a hanging offense. That's a wanted poster with your face on it. Sometimes you didn't even commit the crime. Your cousin robbed a stage and someone said they saw two men. You were with your cousin that day, innocent as Sunday, but now you're wanted as an accomplice. Or maybe you just looked like someone who did something. And in a territory where sheriffs are overworked and witnesses are unreliable, close enough is good enough. The wanted poster itself is a strange piece of work. Printed quickly on cheap paper, distributed to law offices, post offices, and train stations across multiple territories. The description is usually vague enough to implicate half a dozen men. Height, average, build, medium, hair, brown, eyes dark, distinguishing marks, scar on face. That could be anyone who's ever been in a fight. The drawing, if there is one, is often hilariously inaccurate, maybe based on a witness description, maybe sketched by a deputy who saw you once in bad lighting. You've seen your own poster and barely recognised yourself. The nose is wrong, the jaw too square, the hat at an angle you'd never wear, but it doesn't matter. Once your name is attached to that image and that reward amount, you're branded. And here's the truly terrifying part. The reward doesn't expire. That poster stays up for years, decades sometimes. Some men lived under assumed names for 20 years, built new lives, started families, became respected members of small communities, only to have someone recognise them from an old poster tucked in the back of a marshal's desk drawer. One moment, you're a respectable ranch foreman. The next, you're in chains waiting for trial or dead in the street because you reached for something and a nervous bounty hunter thought you were going for your gun. So now the poster is up, your face is out there, and your old life is over. Time to become someone else. You don't get to use your real name anymore. Your name, your real name, is a death sentence, so you bury it. You become Jim Miller one week, Tom Cooper the next, maybe John Smith if you're feeling uninspired or too tired to be creative. You memorize new backstories, practice new signatures, and hope to God you don't slip up and respond when someone shouts your real name across a crowded street. The backstory has to be believable, but vague. You're from back east, drifted west, looking for work. Your family? Dead. Tragic. Don't want to talk about it. Your work history? Bit of everything. Ranch hand, miner, freighter. Nothing specific enough to verify. You keep the details loose, because details are traps. The more you say, the more you have to remember, and one contradiction in your story could get you killed. You move constantly. Staying anywhere longer than a few weeks is suicide. The longer you linger, the more people notice you. The bartender starts asking friendly questions that aren't friendly at all. The livery owner mentions you to a passing lawman. Someone recognizes the way you walk or the scar on your hand. So you saddle up and ride before dawn, leaving behind whatever small comforts you'd started to accumulate. A warm bed, a decent meal, a friendly face. All temporary luxuries you can't afford. Your world shrinks to a handful of places. Remote canyons where no one rides, outlaw towns where the law doesn't bother showing up, Indian territory where jurisdiction gets murky, or across the border into Mexico where American wanted posters carry less weight. Places like Hole in the Wall in Wyoming, Robber's Roost in Utah, or the lawless stretches of the Oklahoma Territory become your only refuge. These places smell like desperation. Wood smoke, horse manure, unwashed men, and the particular stench of fear mixed with bravado. But even there, you're not safe, because bounty hunters don't care about borders or unwritten outlaw codes. They care about money, and they're coming. Let's talk about bounty hunters for a moment, because the reality is far uglier than the Hollywood version. These aren't honourable gunslingers settling scores at high noon. Most are former lawmen who found the pay better on the private side. Pinkerton detectives with resources and relentlessness that would make your skin crawl, or just opportunistic trackers who realised hunting men pays better than hunting buffalo. They work on commission, usually 10 to 25% of the posted reward, and they hunt in packs when the prize is big enough. Some are methodical and patient, willing to track you for months. Others are brutal and efficient, preferring to shoot first and confirm identity later, because corpses don't fight back, don't escape, and don't require feeding. Dead or alive isn't a suggestion, it's a business model. Bringing someone in alive is complicated. You have to feed them, guard them constantly, prevent escape attempts, transport them across dangerous territory. They might have friends who'll try to free them. They're a liability from the moment you clap them in irons until you hand them over. A corpse? That's easy. Throw it over a horse, pack it in salt if you've got access, or just ride hard for the nearest town with a lawman and hope the body doesn't rot beyond recognition. Some bounty hunters became known for their brutality, shooting suspects in the back, killing men in their sleep, murdering anyone who vaguely matched a description and letting the authorities sort out identity later. The famous bounty hunters were legends of fear. Men like Tom Horn, who supposedly kept account of his kills by placing a stone under his pillow for each man he'd shot. Pat Garrett, who tracked Billy the Kid for months before finally gunning him down in a dark bedroom. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency, with its networks of informants, telegraph communications, and resources that made them nearly unstoppable. If the Pinkertons were after you, your days were numbered. So you live like a ghost, haunting the edges of civilization, always watching, always running. Your days follow a grim routine. You wake up in whatever hole you found, a cave that smells like bat droppings and damp stone, an abandoned line shack with a roof that leaks, a tent pitched in a canyon where no one rides. You check your surroundings first thing, always, because the moment you get comfortable is the moment someone puts a bullet in you while you're still rubbing sleep from your eyes. You scan for tracks in the dust, listen for unusual sounds, horses in the distance, the jingle of spurs, voices carried on the wind. You watch for dust clouds on the horizon, because a dust cloud means riders, and riders mean questions you can't answer. You cook over small fires that produce minimal smoke, if you cook at all. Often you eat cold beans straight from the can, jerky that tastes like salted leather, hardtack that requires soaking in coffee just to become chewable. Hot meals are luxuries that announce your location, like a signal fire. You travel at odd hours. Early morning before the sun rises fully, late evening when shadows grow long. You avoid towns when possible, but sometimes you need supplies, ammunition, coffee, tobacco, whiskey, to dull the edges of constant fear. You ride in carefully, hat pulled low over your face, avoiding eye contact. You pay cash, never linger, never make small talk, and you always keep your horse saddled and ready to run. Your horse becomes your most valuable possession, more valuable than your gun, your money, even your life, because without a horse, you're dead. You can't outrun a posse on foot. You can't cross the desert or the mountains without getting caught or dying of exposure. So you treat that animal better than you treat yourself. You give it the best grass, the cleanest water, rest when it needs it. You check its hooves daily, watch for lameness, treat every scrape like a catastrophe. Because if your horse goes lame or dies, you're a sitting target. Sleep becomes a luxury you can't fully afford. You doze in short intervals, never deep, never truly restful. You wake at every sound, a coyote's howl, wind rattling through brush, your horse shifting its weight. Any of it could mean discovery. You learn to sleep light, one hand on your pistol, dreams fragmented and anxious. You wake up exhausted, more tired than when you lay down, joints aching, back stiff, but you keep moving because stopping means capture. And the loneliness, God, the loneliness is crushing. You can't write letters home, can't visit family or old friends, can't court a woman properly or build relationships that require honesty and time. You're cut off from everything that made you human. Your mother doesn't know if you're alive or dead. Your siblings grow older without you, get married, have children you'll never meet. The girl you once loved marries someone else, someone stable, someone without a price on his head. You meet other outlaws occasionally, men in similar situations, and sometimes you ride together for safety. There's a strange comfort in it. Shared campfires, shared stories, a brief illusion of camaraderie. You don't use real names, of course. Everyone's got an alias, a past they don't discuss. You talk about superficial things, good places to hide, towns to avoid, which sheriffs can be bribed. You share a bottle of whiskey that tastes like kerosene, and for a few hours, you almost feel human again. But you can never fully trust them either. Every man riding with you is evaluating the same terrible equation. Is friendship worth more than the reward on your head? Some outlaw gangs developed real loyalty. Jesse James and his crew, Butch Cassidy's wild bunch. But even those bonds frayed under pressure. When the law closed in or money ran short, men turned on each other. Brothers betrayed brothers. Partners shot partners in the back. Because at the end of the day, survival trumps friendship. Let's talk about money, because here's the cruel irony. You're an outlaw, presumably because you wanted money, and yet you're almost always broke. Whatever you stole, stagecoach loot, bank money, rustled cattle, it doesn't last. You can't deposit it in a bank under your real name, can't invest it or build property. You spend it on immediate survival, supplies that cost 3 times what they should, bribes to corrupt lawmen, payoffs to informants. You pay inflated costs because sellers know you're desperate and can't haggle or walk away. A bottle of whiskey that costs $1 in town costs you $3 in an outlaw camp. A box of ammunition, double the price. A new pair of boots, 5 times what they're worth, and you pay it because the alternative is riding barefoot. Everything is marked up because you have no leverage, no recourse, no choice. You can't work legitimate jobs. No ranch will hire you if they recognize your face or if you can't provide references. You can't apprentice a trade, can't build a business. So your only income is more crime, more robbery, more rustling, more violence, which increases your bounty and makes your situation worse. The bounty amounts varied wildly. Small-time criminals, horse thieves, minor rustlers might fetch $50 to $500. Serious outlaws who'd killed lawmen or robbed trains could command $1,000 to $5,000. The truly notorious had bounties reaching $10,000 or more. To put that in perspective, a working cowboy made about $30 a month. A decent horse cost $40. A farm labourer might earn $1 a day if he was lucky. So even a modest $500 bounty represented a life-changing sum. Enough to buy land, start a business, secure your family's future, which meant everyone was constantly evaluating whether turning you in was worth more than whatever relationship you'd built with them. And the answer was usually yes. Some men made entire careers as informants, cultivating relationships with outlaws just to sell information to lawmen and bounty hunters. They'd ride with you, share your campfire, laugh at your jokes, memorize your habits and hideouts, then disappear one night and return with a posse at dawn. The betrayal was expected, even inevitable, but it still stung every single time. You developed strategies to survive. The smart outlaws built informant networks, bartenders who overheard conversations, prostitutes who entertained lawmen and reported what they learned, telegraph operators who read incoming messages and tipped you off, sympathetic locals who liked you better than they liked the law. You paid these people well, rewarded loyalty with cash, created a fragile web of protection. But these networks were only as reliable as the next bigger bribe. Corrupt lawmen were another survival tool, though dealing with them was like handling dynamite. Some sheriffs and marshals could be bought, convinced to look the other way, or provide advance warning when federal agents were coming. You paid them monthly, quarterly, whatever kept them cooperative. But you could never fully trust them either, because if the heat got too intense or a bigger reward came along, they'd turn on you without hesitation. Mobility was your best defense. Never establish patterns. Never return to the same hideout twice in a row. Never take the same route through town. Randomness kept you alive because it made you unpredictable. Posses expected you to run toward familiar territory, so you went the opposite direction. They anticipated you'd hide in the mountains, so you stayed in the desert. The moment you became predictable, you became catchable. Some outlaws cultivated public sympathy, fashioning themselves as Robin Hood figures who robbed corrupt banks and railroads while helping poor farmers. Jesse James excelled at this, spreading stories of his generosity to widows and veterans. The mythology helped. Locals were less likely to turn you in if they saw you as a folk hero. But when federal agents and Pinkerton detectives arrived with serious money and resources, local sympathy evaporated quickly. And then there was violence. You carried a gun always, slept with it, ate with it, never let it out of reach, because confrontation was inevitable. Sooner or later, someone would try to collect that bounty, and when they did, you had seconds to decide: fight or surrender. Most chose to fight. Gunfights weren't like the movies, dramatic standoffs at noon with time for speeches. They were fast, chaotic, terrifying, often at close range in a dim saloon or a dusty street. Poor lighting, adrenaline making your hands shake, the sound of gunfire deafening. You fired, they fired, and usually someone ended up bleeding in the dirt, while bystanders scattered, and the air filled with gun smoke that smelled like sulfur and death. If you survived, you ran immediately, because more lawmen would come. You mounted your horse and rode hard for anywhere else, leaving behind your supplies, your shelter, whatever life you'd been trying to build. If you didn't survive, well, at least the paranoia was over. Every confrontation increased your bounty. Killing a lawman or a bounty hunter added thousands to the reward, transformed you from a wanted criminal into a priority target. It was a vicious cycle: violence begetting violence, infamy begetting pursuit, survival requiring more crime, which guaranteed you'd never escape. The psychological toll was immense. Many outlaws described the life as exhausting beyond anything they'd imagined. The constant vigilance, the inability to rest, the knowledge that every person you met might be calculating your worth, it broke men down. Some turned to whiskey, drinking themselves numb just to sleep a few hours, without nightmares. Others grew paranoid to the point of madness, seeing threats everywhere, shooting at shadows. Letters and journals from captured outlaws revealed deep loneliness and regret. They wrote about missing their families, their homes, the simple comforts of normal life. They described wanting to surrender, to end the running, to face justice just to stop looking over their shoulders. Some did turn themselves in, accepting prison as preferable to perpetual flight. At least in prison, you could sleep at night. Others chose suicide. Rather than face capture, trial, and execution, they took their own lives, leaving behind notes expressing exhaustion and despair. The West was full of unmarked graves containing men who decided death by their own hand was better than death at the end of a rope or a bounty hunter's bullet, but some kept running until the very end, refusing to quit. They became legends, not because their lives were glamorous, but because they refused to surrender. They died in shootouts, ambushes, betrayals. Billy the Kid, shot by Pat Garrett in a dark bedroom, barely 21 years old. Jesse James, killed by Robert Ford, a member of his own gang, for the reward money. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, possibly dying in a hail of gunfire in Bolivia, though some claimed they escaped and lived quietly until old age. The truth is, almost no one with a serious bounty on their head lived happily ever after. They either died violently young, surrendered and went to prison, or disappeared so completely that history lost track of them, which was itself a kind of death, erasing your identity so thoroughly that you cease to exist as the person you'd been. And here's what the wanted posters never showed: the human cost. You weren't just running from the law, you were running from yourself, from the man you'd become, from the choices that haunted you. Every act of violence, every betrayal you witnessed or committed, every innocent bystander caught in crossfire, every friend you abandoned, they accumulated like weight on your soul. You justified it at first: self-defense, survival. They shot first, but over time, the justifications wore thin, and you were left staring at your reflection, wondering when exactly you'd cross the line from victim of circumstances to genuine outlaw. Some men hardened completely, embracing the violence, becoming the monsters the wanted posters claimed they were. Their eyes were dead, empty, the humanity burned out by too many years of running and killing. Others carried the guilt like a stone in their chest, growing quieter, More withdrawn, more haunted. They helped people when they could, paid for a widow's supplies, left money for orphans, as if small acts of kindness could balance the scales. It never worked, the guilt remained. And in the end, what did you have to show for it? No home, no family, no legacy except a crude drawing on a piece of paper, and maybe a paragraph in a history book that got most of the details wrong. Your real name forgotten, replaced by whatever alias the newspapers preferred. Your crimes exaggerated into legend, while your humanity faded into obscurity. So, how was your time as a wanted man? You've choked on trail dust, frozen at night, in hideouts that smelled like fear and damp earth, eaten nothing but cold beans and jerky until your stomach cramped, dodged bounty hunters and lawmen and former friends, turned informants, maybe got shot at, definitely got lice, and realised that freedom and survival are just different words for being hunted, still dreaming of the outlaw life, of riding free, living by your own rules, answering to no one. The myth is powerful. We've built an entire cultural identity around it. The rugged individualist, the rebel who won't be tamed. But the reality was far less romantic. It was brutal, chaotic, lonely, and profoundly desperate. Most men with bounties didn't become legends. Most didn't even survive the first year. Once serious hunters picked up their trail, the frontier wasn't about freedom. It was about survival. Every day was a gamble. Would you eat today? Would you find water? Would someone recognize you? There were no safety nets, no second chances, and very little mercy. You either adapted, endured, or died. And most people chose endurance, even when it destroyed them. But here's the remarkable thing. Despite all that suffering, despite the paranoia and the violence, some men still found moments of humanity. They still helped strangers, still sang songs around campfires, still fell in love, even though they knew it couldn't last. They found humour in dark places, formed bonds that mattered even if they were temporary, created meaning in a life that seemed designed to strip it away. They weren't all monsters. Most were just men who made mistakes or got unlucky or were born into circumstances that gave them terrible options, and they chose the least terrible one. They were human, flawed and desperate and sometimes cruel, but also sometimes generous and loyal and brave. So tonight, when you lock your door and sleep safely in a bed without worrying that someone's going to kick it down before dawn, when you use your real name without fear, when you build relationships that last years instead of days, maybe take a moment to appreciate it. Because your ancestors survived the frontier, the outlaws, the bounty hunters, and the endless violence. They lived in a world where a piece of paper with your face on it could end your life, where trust was a luxury nobody could afford, where the price of freedom was eternal vigilance. They endured it all, so you wouldn't have to. And somewhere in the dust of the Wild West, in unmarked graves and forgotten hideouts, and wanted posters yellowed with age, their stories remain, violent, desperate, and heartbreakingly human.